Hey everybody, I just wanted to touch on something today that's pretty close to my heart, and it'd be first responder, whether that's police, fire, EMS, nurses, doctors, dispatchers. That term encompasses a lot of people. Today I'm mostly going to speak from a firefighter standpoint because that's what I'm most familiar with. But this equally applies to all those other agencies that I mentioned. So don't take it that I'm trying to discount that, military, anything by any stretch of the imagination. It's just, I'm going to try to stay in my lane a little bit, and I'm not professional on this, but it's a first responder PTSD. It's something that I think touches several of us in the industry, and I kind of see it day in and day out, but I don't think most people are familiar with it. I've grown really familiar with it to an extent in my experiences, and that's what I want to touch on today. I'm not an expert. I just want to talk about it a little bit in case you're one of those out there that are dealing with some of these issues and you don't know where to turn, because that's when it seems like there is a lot of resources out there for this, but sometimes where to start is the hardest place. So today it's just first responder from the lane of firefighter PTSD is kind of where I'm at. And so when you hear that term, you're mostly thinking military, that kind of thing. And that's where my aspect started from, was thinking that's all that could affect. But now looking back that I'm more educated and have been through some processes, I understand it can take a toll on anyone. So what does it look like? What's PTSD look like? Well, that's it. That's what it looks like for me. Happy family, right? There's me, my daughter, beautiful wife, been married coming up on 20 years. So all looks good, right? The picture's great. This was recent this year picture, and things are good here. But it's a long road to get to where I was at. In 2017, I think this subject was first touched on with a family doctor of mine. It was just, I was telling him about my symptoms. I started out just so irritable all the time. I'm just kind of pissed off at the world. The smallest thing can set me off, this or that. And he said, well, it kind of sounds like you're burned out. And again, this was 2017. I'd felt that way for a couple of years coming into 2017. That was the first time I actually opened up to anyone. That was my family doctor. So that would have been the first time I took any antidepressant or any medication of any sort for it. I don't know that it was effective. It was a starting place. Things just progressed, got worse, so on, so forth over the years. Went back to him. We decided to go down the road of therapy in probably 2021. So he set me up with a therapist, started talking to them. It was always fine. I really enjoyed my therapy sessions. I enjoyed my therapist. Was very happy, but it was more of a talk therapy environment. In my mind at that point, it was, you're going to a therapist. All therapists are kind of under the umbrella, all created equal. They all are just a therapist. When it was kind of, maybe I was seeing a dentist for a broke arm when I should have been an orthopedic surgeon. I should have been seeing. So just like any other profession, I wasn't aware of it, and they all have their own lanes. So while it helped somewhat, I just wasn't getting better. I think I was getting worse. It just kept building up. I was just so angry all the time. I knew I was angry. I knew I was irritable. I couldn't flip that switch to turn it off, even knowing what I was doing. I felt like I was making my family kind of walk on eggshells. I wouldn't say we ever fought or got into arguments or, anything of that sort. But in my mind, I knew they knew things that would set me off. So they would tiptoe around those things. And from my perspective, I felt very bad about that. Why should these awesome people behind me have to walk on eggshells around me, you know? So what that did, you know, that digs you deeper. It's like your self-confidence goes way down. Your irritability is still there. You're angry. It's just a cascade of different events that build off each other. So that's where I was stuck. I was kind of stuck in this circle, and I remember I was, so just to give a background, I'm 41 years old. I started as a career / professional fireman, whatever you want to call it, basically right out of high school. So I got my EMT and went straight. I was fortunate enough to get hired on a professional fire department and have been a professional fireman for the last 21 years. So this is really all I've known. So where I started to the person I became was unrecognizable. I isolated. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to take phone calls. I would get anxiety if my phone would ring because I just didn't want to be around or talk to anybody. I wanted to live on an island by myself. That way no one had an expectation of me. I didn't have to worry about being a jerk or this or that. And it was easier in my mind if that's where I went. So that's where the road kept going. The hole kept getting deeper, darker, to a point. I remember one day I was sitting at work and I just overheard a conversation, and I think it was about another fireman somewhere. I had no idea, don't know the person. It was just kind of out of the corner of my ear, heard this another fireman committed suicide. So in my mind, I remember exactly where I was sitting. I remember the exact feeling I had and where I was at mentally with all these issues. And I thought, I gotta fix something, because I was touched with suicide in my teenage years. I understand it. I had a family member who committed suicide when I was a teenager. It was an elderly person in my family who had a terminal illness. I look at it as a selfless act on their part, because as many of you can relate, a long-term illness on a family takes its toll not just on the patient, but the whole family. And so if there's a best case scenario for suicide, I think that's what I was exposed to. I never harbored a grudge against the individual. I actually, like I said, look at it as a selfless act. And so I was exposed to suicide and seeing the ramifications of it on a family, even in what I would call the best case scenarios, because like I said, I thought it was a selfless act. It was an elderly individual, And through my 21 years in the fire service, countless suicides I've been on. Just several suicides. I know the smells, I know the feels, I know the environment. I know the family standing outside, what it's doing to them. So suicide was always in my mind. I don't understand how someone could do it. I just don't understand it. So now we take you back to that place I was sitting at work, flashback to, I went from I don't understand how someone could do it to I understand why that guy maybe just did that. I get it. And that really scared me. So I'm, like I said, I've dug this hole, I'm deep, and now it hits me that, you know what, I get it. I can understand, because I don't want to say that I wanted to die, but I wanted not to be a burden to anyone. I didn't want to be irritable. I didn't want to be a jerk. I didn't want to make my family walk on eggshells. That's nothing I wanted. I didn't want to die, but it would just been easier if I wasn't a burden to anyone. That's how it worked in my mind. So I never had a gun in my mouth. I never was that far along. I had ideations, which is basically I remember it. I was on a plane by myself. It was me. My family wasn't with me one day. And I was literally praying, I just wish the plane would crash. Best case scenario, I didn't commit suicide, but I'm dead. I'm not a burden. That in my mind was literally, like I said, I prayed for that. So that's where I was. So it really scared me that I went from, I don't understand how anyone could do this, to now I get it. So that's the point. I said, I've got to find some other way to deal with this. I've got to get help. So there was a resource out there where I'm a professional fireman. I'm a member of the IFF, which is the Firefighters Union. Basically, it's an international union. And so behind, you could kind of see, I tried to throw this up just to give you an idea. They have what's called the IFF Center of Excellence. It's based right outside of Washington, D.C. It is a recovery center for any IFF member dealing from PTSD to drug, alcohol abuse, anything their members are dealing with, that's where you go. So it's a great resource I had available to me. It's an inpatient treatment facility. So I was to a point, I was so deep in my hole, and I was just blessed. I could realize that's how deep I was in my hole at that point to make the phone call. Just to put it in perspective, this would have been at the end of 2022, right before Christmas. So I checked into the IFF Center of Excellence late December, spent 37 or 8 days, I forget right off the top of my head, inpatient. So it was important enough for me that I spent Christmas away from my family, New Year's away from my family. Didn't see him for those many days, limited times I could even speak to him. But that's where I was at, that I knew I needed to get better. They have a website, it's the IFF Recovery Center. It's got a phone number there. So right here, I wrote it. I'm going to try to put a link at the end of the video. I'm not sure I'm smart enough to do that. So I just wanted to be sure that someone, if they needed this number or website, there it is. It's also behind me if you want to take a look at it. So that's, I spent, like I said, 30 some days there inpatient. Learned so much stuff. Learned that there's so many avenues that you don't have to live like that. You don't have to be angry or irritable. But I learned to understand what was wrong with me. I always had a hard time accepting that I could have PTSD just from the fire service, because I always thought it was reserved for military members who I respect so much. And I was in a trauma group. If you qualify for a trauma group while you're at the Center of Excellence, they put you in a trauma group. There was 3 other individuals and myself in this particular trauma group. All 3 of those were war veterans, had seen combat, and now were professional firemen. And so that was something I brought up in trauma group. I said, I never felt like I deserved to even qualify for that, PTSD. I hadn't seen war, I haven't seen bullets fly by my head. And they all 3 assured me, you do have the right to have that. You have been on a 21-year deployment, So that was a little comforting to hear it from a war veteran, and that made it easier for me. And the people that you're around at the Center of Excellence are ordinary firemen from around the country. They are just like me. They're like you. They're people you would never think are having a problem in their life, and there they are. I have some really good friends that there's still a meeting we do every Sunday from some of the people that was in our group. I have text groups. So if this is something you're dealing with and you don't want to talk to me or somebody around here, reach out to me. I can get you a phone number from any part of the country, from a professional fireman, and they'd be glad to talk to you. Somebody you don't even know that can help you, So there are various resources for you. Next, This is another Chip Terry fun. I'm not going to go into this story. I encourage anyone who hasn't heard of it, maybe check out the website, read the story, see what it's based on. A great resource. ChipTerryFund.org. Right here, I wrote that again. ChipTerryFund.org. I didn't attach a phone number. There's a contact information on here. A great resource for anybody. So, I didn't want to be too long-winded. I want to wrap this up. I just wanted to get it out there. And here's the basic purpose of this video. Maybe somebody's watching this and like, man, that is me. You know, you don't have to be that. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to be irritable. You don't have to be down on yourself. You know, I've done so many tests from the beginning of my journey till now that all of my trauma, all of my PTSD is based from work-related incidents. You know, I had a great childhood growing up. None of my traumas, scores, or any of my testing goes back to that. It's all been from job-related. And there's obviously incidents that runs through all of our heads, but there isn't like one that just haunts me. You know, I've had calls before, and this was something I never told anybody until my trauma group, and they're like, hey, I did that too. There's certain incidents I would have, and for a while after that, I would sleep with the light on. Just whatever. You know, I just slept with the light on. You know, I'm a grown man, sleeping with the light on. Not a night light, I'm talking a lamp, you know. So, but it was just the totality of all those years of the different things, the stress, the pressure we're under on a daily basis, the incidents we're involved in. I was never able to unplug from that. So I have been on duty for the last 21 years. You know, I get off work 24/48. I never unplugged. So I was always running in that state, which leads to all those. When I got admitted to the IFF Center of Excellence, I was diagnosed with major depression, severe anxiety, PTSD, which the first two stem from the PTSD. So I would think it's running in a lot of your people's minds that are relating to what I'm talking to. Even though you might not be there thinking it applies to you, it does. There's resources. There's so many avenues to take. Since I've been home from the Center of Excellence, I do weekly therapy sessions with my trauma therapist. There's, you know, I've had, maybe you could Google SGB injections, stellate ganglion block injections. It's injections you can get in your neck to help with stuff. There's medicines, there's therapy, there's EMDR. Even now they're talking about psychedelics. I mean, the list is endless of the resources you have to get better. Yoga, breathing. I mean, and here's the one thing I want you to take from this though. Not one of those puzzle pieces is going to fix you. So everything I mentioned is a small puzzle piece. Put them together, you're a little better. You're a little better. Am I better? I'm better. I'm better than a year ago. I'm better than 5 years ago. But I am not cured. There's days that are good, there's days that are bad. I have a lot of coping tools in my toolbox now that I can use, and I do use daily. Again, I said, you know, I'm doing weekly therapy sessions with a trauma specialist. That might not ever end for me. This is something just like, you know, maybe you have a heart condition, you take a medication for, you know, from now until the day you die. This is no different for us. If you're carrying this burden, don't think there's going to be one magic bullet that fixes this, one magic pill, one magic whatever. There's not. It's a lot of work. So if you're there, if you're listening, you think maybe this is me, maybe it ain't, call me. Reach out to these resources. Tell somebody. Talk to anybody. I don't care. Somebody. Because you don't have to be miserable. You can be happy. You know, I'm still finding happiness. And I just, there's help out there. So this is my name. That's my phone number. If you need anything, you call it, you text it. If you don't want to talk to me, I understand that. I'll try to shoot you to a different direction or get you to a resource that can help you. I've thought about locally, you know, if there's, well, it doesn't even have to be locally anymore with today's technology. But my initial thought was locally do a first responders group. You know, if you wanted to show up somewhere, very informal. We show up, we hang out, we drink coffee, we talk about whatever we want to talk about, and, you know, share experiences, share stories. Again, I would be happy to be a resource for you to get you in a direction to get that process started for you. So if that's something people's interested in, please message me, email me, call me, whatever. So I appreciate you watching this video. I ask that you share the video. I'm not worried about likes or comments. Just share it. Because I can promise somebody's going to watch this somewhere, and hopefully we can help some people to get better and realize that there's nothing wrong with this. It comes from the job. It's nothing to be ashamed of, and you can be better. Thank you.